Good morning, family and friends. Going to talk to you from the subject brokenness. Brokenness. God has to force us out of our own sense of self dependence so that He can bless us even as we cling to our brokenness. Many, including myself, have often felt that when we are in a state of brokenness, there is no hope for us. But God presents us with blessings in the state of brokenness. Before God can use us, He must break our own sense of self-dependence and our propensity to trust in ourselves and not in Him. God's wrestling with Jacob was not a dream or a vision. Dreams and visions don't leave a man with a dislocated hip. Jacob's opponent was the angel of the Lord, Jesus Christ Himself in pre-incarnate form. It was a physical fight, and a physical injury was inflicted on Jacob because it was physical. While physical, there was an obvious spiritual lesson being pressed upon him through this unforgettable experience. It must have been a terrifying sight for Jacob to be wrestling with an angel, wrestling with Christ Himself. Here he was already afraid about Esau's approach with 400 men. He had already sent forth elaborate gifts of animals, and he had sent forth riches, and he tried to go to sleep, but he couldn't sleep. So he woke up his family and moved them across the ford of the Jabbok. Then Jacob went back alone for a final check to make sure that everything was okay, that there had been nothing left behind to lead Esau to know where they had camped at. It's dark and spooky, and he's already on edge, and suddenly out of the dark a hand reaches and grabs Jacob. Jacob must have almost had a heart attack. Who was this? Was it a bandit? What was it? Esau? Was it an assassin? Instinctively, Jacob began to wrestle with this mysterious assailant, struggling for his very life. Let's be clear here. In this situation, God is the aggressor, and Jacob was defending himself. Some preachers develop this text as a fine example of Jacob wrestling with prayer all night long, wrestling with God until you bless me. But this is not the lesson behind the struggle. Jacob wasn't laying hold of God to gain something from him. God was laying hold of Jacob to gain something from him, namely to bring Jacob to a point where he had to depend solely on God. All this life, Jacob had thought that Esau and Laban were his adversaries. He had struggled and schemed to get the blessings he thought that these men were taking from him, blessings that God had promised to give him anyway. But now at some point in the struggle, he discovers to his horror that none other than God is his adversary. His adversary is not named Laban. His adversary is not named Esau, but God is his adversary. The reality is this: Jacob was his own adversary, but God had to wrestle him into submission to reveal this unto him. We're all like Jacob. I know I am. We think the enemy is the problem that's out there. We think the problem is our wives, our husbands, our parents, our bosses, our circumstances. God, please take care of my problem for me. But the enemy or problem isn't primarily out there. Sometimes the problem is in here. The problem is me. my flesh, my sinful, selfish nature that dominates my life, my own desire to be large and in charge, my desire to do things my way and not humbly submit to the urging and leading of God. So God has to reveal his power to me, the power of my flesh, before I can become delivered from it. He has to deliver to me the power of my flesh before I can be delivered from it. The power of pride, the power of selfishness, the power of deceitfulness, the power of self-righteousness, the power of self-dependence. God has to reveal that power unto me, and then he has to put me through a breaking process in order to deliver me from it. Brokenness. God needs us to put aside our own self-dependence so that he can bless us in the midst of our brokenness. God bless and keep you is our prayer. And as always, should you have any questions, please feel free to inbox me.